Hey everyone, absolutely great to be here, and especially talking about a topic that I know is close to not just our heart, but pretty much everyone's heart. You know, if you take a look and go down this lane leading up to this room, you will see this word getting repeated. I don't know how many times, right? The word listening, right? And clearly during these turbulent times of the last few years, the one thing that can ground organizations is possibly building a culture of listening, right? Which is why I'm really excited to be here with such a bunch of diverse leaders and representing a very wide array of organizations. And we will have time for Q&A at the end, so do keep thinking of questions that you would like to ask us later. But Ranjan, let me kind of start with you, right? I just spoke about listening. And HR people are quite fond of their buzzwords, right? We are fond of getting into the new jargon, whatever it is. Why do you think listening, quote unquote, has become such a buzzword recently? And do you think it's just a buzzword, or do you think it's there's something more sustainable behind it?
Well, first, because until very recently, engagement and experience were being used interchangeably, like without any distinguishable difference. And it's very recently that leaders and organizations have woken up to the fact that they're different. And I would like to give a metaphorical view of that. If you have seen the movie The Truman Show, where a man is given an opportunity to live in an experience in an organization created for him, and the environment was designed for him. But eventually, however, regardless of what happened, eventually he leaves the world. And however hard the organization tried to retain him, he eventually leaves. And that's how finally we are coming to a juncture where we are understanding that there is an intersection between the employees' expectations, wants, and needs. And that intersection is what is to be tapped into. And that's exactly what we need. And listening has emerged because that became the gateway to that intersection. And yes, it needs sustained attention because it's very human desire to be heard. And how else do we hear unless you listen? And all tech, all the processes that changes that we are doing is only to give that innate, feel of that listening. So that's where it's going to be here.
Thank you. That's actually a great analogy because I love movies. And as you were talking, I was thinking back about the many movies that I've seen in which I guess the movie would have finished much earlier if one character had actually listened to another. But going from movies to movies of another kind, which are our organizations, which are no less than big Bollywood dramas sometimes, I'm going to ask Dr. Jayakumar and Divya about this, right? That how do you really, what kind of tools and mechanisms do you use? And both of you represent vastly different organizations, two very different industries operating at very different scale. What kind of tools and mechanisms do you use to really truly listen to employees and your workforce?
Thank you. Before I move into that question, I should like to add, I look at listening in two ways. One is from the employee perspective. It is a high level of intrinsic motivation, right? Being heard, my opinion counts. I can influence the decision. That is from the employee. From the company point of view, so much of changes happening, VUCA world, the technology disruption, so many things are happening. Data is the new oil, right? You have to take decisions. Continuously getting feedback, getting opinions from people will influence the decision. So it's very, very, very important, okay? And listening is not new. Coming to your question, it's been years together, right? And traditionally, if we look at, when I started my career, it was once in a year survey. You go for Gallup, or you go for GPTW, or you have your own surveys. Then gradually moved on to various modules started coming. You have a talent acquisition module, you have a learning and development module. Immediately after you sourcing, you ask a survey whether how did you like the experience part of it. And different touch points, there were surveys. And now we have moved to pulse survey, okay, at different levels, different things. In fact, she's from Uber. I really like that. As soon as you get down, it asks how was the ride, and you rate the car, and the driver rates you. Okay, I didn't know that for a long time. Driver also rate us. Based on us, we get the next car on time or not. Okay, so it's the pulse survey part of it. Then there is a formal survey, there is an anonymous survey. Then there are various other methods like you use Teams, you use Slack, you use emails, different types of surveys we use. What more important is whether you ask the right question at the right time and what you do with it. Right? I will add later, and let me pass on to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jayakumar. In fact, listening at Uber is not restricted to employees. For us, our driver partners and customers are equally important. So the paradigm extends. Having said that, thank you for bringing up what tools and processes organizations use. And I think that's where it starts, because processes also build the way we think and operate. Three things I think which stand out based on my experience with Uber for us is, when it comes to survey, it's there, but like you said, immediately after the ride, a survey pops up. With that principle, something that we follow in Uber is called the continuous listening intent. And how that manifests is not just having our surveys timely, which means it's not once in a quarter, it means it's every month. It means it's administered every month to a percentage of employees, for us always to have that pulse in terms of what's happening on the ground. It's also embedded across the organization processes, so that listening is not just siloed and happening on the side. When we talk about a perf process, for example, we have something that we call the concept of timely feedback, which means, I as an individual am able to gather feedback based on any interaction from any stakeholder at the moment that matters. Third thing is, specifically for our underrepresented groups, we have something that we call house work, where we reach out to, any of these groups, certain ethnic groups, it could be women, it could be parents, any of the underrepresented group, to understand, what is the pulse there. So it is about looking at the organization as one whole. It is about working across the processes, and at the same time, it's about looking at certain specific groups. But before I end the question on tools and processes, I must admit that none of these tools and processes can work without a culture of openness. At Uber, we take pride in an open and transparent culture. Now, of course, it takes a lot, and one cannot identify one thing which led to building this culture. But for this group, I do want to identify three things. I think for us, a culture of listening starts with one of our cultural values, which is called great minds don't think alike. Yes, that's what it says. It says that great mind don't think alike. What does it mean for me? It means I don't have to agree to everything is being said. I am still free to share my point of view. We can choose to agree to disagree later, but that is what it tells me. How this manifests is to say from Dara, who's our global lead, who ends up taking every difficult question that comes to us in forums like AMAs or all hands that he conducts, and it comes up on a screen. And he can choose not to show it on the screen or not to address it, but he goes marching right ahead and addresses that question to that sentiment and percolating to every leader who reflect the same sentiment in what they do. The second is, I think, the listening also comes with the twin sentiment of sharing. If our leaders don't share their personal stories, don't share their experiences, don't share their vulnerable sense, the employees will never be able to talk, will never be able to share, and then what meaning does listening have? So these are the two things. I think third thing is, each of us, do active listening, also passive listening. When I say active listening, like I host lunch with Divya sessions every Friday, 12 to 2, where, we invite cohorts or anyone is open, to come and talk. And this is not just me. This is representative of all of our leadership put together. So at every point in time, the intent for us is that we should know what is the pulse of our organization.
That's a great point, actually. And, all kinds of tools and systems are ultimately subject to building the right culture. So, flipping it back to you, Dr. Jayakumar, I mean, especially with an organization that is as embedded, as vast as an L&T is, right? How do you, over a period of time, build the kind of culture that Divya spoke about?
Yeah, before I get into that, when she was answering, I reflected. When you asked about tools, we thought of all technology. The basic fundamental thing I forgot, face-to-face communication, right? Meeting the people in the shop floor, meeting them at project site, talking to them one-to-one, getting the feedback. That still holds very, very true, and that gives a lot of pressure. Moving to the culture, after the survey is done, what you do? There are different types of organization. Some organization collect the feedback and keep quiet. Some at least acknowledge the feedback. Yes, we have received that feedback. Some take action. Some take action and inform the people that we have taken this action. Some not only take action, and based on the feedback, if they give a good feedback, they reward, recognize, and appreciate these people. So this shows the culture, the continuum in which it is done. So there should be a culture of openness, culture of transparency, culture of recognition, culture of acceptance. Then there will be a feedback. If you give a feedback and people start tracing you, who is the person who has given this feedback, then the whole system of feedback will collapse. Nobody will open the mouth. So it's a upward circle, right? If you give a feedback, if you recognize, the person gets appreciated, it's again open trust, culture comes, then it keeps moving up. If it is reverse, it will go down, 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 and you will not get any response to anything, or it will be a very passive. If you have a 5-point scale in the center, all tick will be there and matter will be moved.
But that kind of culture takes a lot of time to build. And of course, there are lots of the tools and processes out there that help you. And in fact, Karan and Ranjan, both of you represent organizations that have built tools around various HR solutions and services. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of principles or research has gone into building the kind of tools that you have?
Great, Sudeep. As we were discussing even before this discussion, it took us around 4 years to do the homework and research about what are the key challenges that even the existing users of technology are facing. So we primarily focused on 3 aspects. And the first one was, most organizations now realize that they ought to have the tech enablement. But the key challenge what we found is that they are looking for a solution for all levels of employees. And that's where we started working at building a tool which could cater to their needs of employees at all levels. The second one, I would say, we were looking, the other key challenge, which even in this event also we keep listening, is the UX. So the experience from the UX. Now anything less than Netflix or Amazon doesn't work out, because we are so used to the social media, and Gen Z and millennials, we are brought up feeding on that. So probably expecting them not to expect would not work anymore. So the making our tool with the primary aspect of serving them with consumer grade technology was the second factor that we focused on. And the third one was a tool which is not just about experience, because at the end of the day, we are looking for results, we are looking for business, and we are looking for growth, and we talk about ROI. So we were looking at something that leaders can put to use, bridging the gap between the employee needs and the business needs. So that's exactly where we thought the tool which could be deep enough to get the feelings of the employees and vast enough to serve the business and get the HR leaders the business results. That's what we've had in consideration while building this tool.
Yeah, I think that's a good set of principles, right? And especially for people out here who are either looking to build tools for their clients or build tools for themselves. These are good principles to go back to. But Karan, what about you? I mean, could you share some more examples and principles?
Sure. So at HR1, so we are not just about software. So rather we want to really simplify lives of HR. So what we do, so we continuously follow few things that is how we are delivering great products to our customer. So we are active listeners. So we listen to our customers as well as market needs, and then identify the things that are really making life complex. So step one is that. And second is, whatever we design and build, it has to be frictionless. So whatever we build, the user should be onboarded on that frictionless. So that is the second aspect so that the customer gets the immediate ROI. So in the quest of simplifying tool for HR, so we have recently launched Inbox for HR, which is as simple as Gmail, which is automating 125 plus processes of HR. So why we have built it like an inbox? Because every employee, every user knows how to use email. So we do not want to give something that he has to learn. So there should be a zero learning curve for that tool.
Got it. And I think the last word that you mentioned, right, the simplification part of it is super critical. There's just so much incredible amount of data, processes, etc. out there that whether it be HR people or CXOs can certainly trip up, right, in the midst of all this. And speaking of tripping up, I guess that's my last question, and Karan, I'm going to start with you and then go around the panel, right, is really around, as we think about driving this agenda, and you spoke about listening not just to your employees, but your customers and so on, what are the kind of pitfalls or risks that we must keep in mind and we should be careful about?
Sure. So here I would like to share a few of my examples, experience that I have when I launched listening program at HR1. So one thing is never underestimate the resources that will be required to launch listening program. So resources can be technology, people, time, money. So it's a continuous process. So it is not a process that you do one and that's it. It is not a stopgap arrangement. So you really have to invest consistent effort and time to roll out. Second is that communication is very important. You need to communicate the intent to everyone in the organization why this is the program and why we are doing it. If the intent is not clear, then it will fall. Second is every conversation should be authentic. So that is very important. Every conversation should be authentic. Reason is there should not be any underlying agenda for that conversation because everyone knows and people will stop speaking up and your listening program can go for a toss. And keep it simple, start small and then grow. So yeah, these are few.
Thank you. In fact, that's one of the things we were talking about earlier that, you know, as they say, it's really the biggest danger zone that a company can get into is when your best employees fall silent. And you know, that's really what you need to avoid. But thank you for those set of principles. Divya, how about you?
So we're talking about pitfalls. Yes, I think if I were to summarize, I'll say 4 things. Listening is manifested via process, but it has to rest as a DNA. It has to rest as a DNA for the leadership to say, hey, we want to listen to our employees and it matters to us. So that's the aspect, let's qualify as that the listening culture. The second to me is about continuous listening, which means yes, there is a survey, but it has to be embedded across processes, across interactions. So we said listening embedded as a DNA. We said it has to be continuous. I think third for me is equally important, which is to say listening but not acting, which will then lead to people not opening up or sharing. And the examples could be, plenty. It could be small things in terms of what we are getting from data or, what we are listening. It could also be certain predictive analytics to say, hey, what does this mean? What are the leading indicators I'm seeing in terms of how people are feeling? And the fourth one is around, when we are listening, it's not just about listening to the organization as a whole, but also looking at certain homogeneous cohorts and groups, like I mentioned, the underrepresentative groups in Uber. Yeah. I think that's about it.
That's a good set. And especially when you think about, I love what you said about listening but not kind of acting on it, right? I mean, that's a biggest trust breaker in a conversation. So completely get that. Dr. Jayakumar, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Wonderful. The way both of them expressed. One is...
Very little points left, aren't there?
Yeah. The intent has to be pakka, and he said it should be authentic. She says it should be continuous, and there should not be acting, which I earlier told you how to act on this. For me, if I take one leaf out of this, it's maybe a part of trust. Okay? Trust in the management, trust in the leader, trust in the boss, trust in the whole system as such, if I have to give a feedback, right? I'll give a simple example. You take a 2 axis, one high trust and low trust. This side you have positive feedback and a negative feedback. Okay? You trust the person very well and you give a positive feedback, immediately he will accept because he trusts you. You give a positive, he will say, oh, thank you very much. You trust a person very much, you are giving a negative feedback. I know him, I know he is my well-wisher, he is giving me negative feedback, immediately I will introspect, right? Oh, why he has told? There is something should be there, I have to introspect. I don't trust him, okay? He gives a positive feedback. I will suspect. Right? I will not accept it and say, very good, thank you very much, no. This fellow has given a positive feedback, something wrong. No trust and no negative feedback, I'll just ignore and get away. Let him tell anything, I'm not bothered. So trust is the fulcrum of the whole thing of feedback. And if trust is established, then you can leverage the listening culture and take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. For any of you who love frameworks like I do, I think that's a very nice trust listening framework that we can use. And Ranjan, finally, one last thought from you as well on this topic.
Thanks for asking me after Mr. Jayakumar.
I know. I put you in a spot. No pressure.
I hope you'll trust me after this. So, yes. I would say that, although we are all here to talk in favor of data and technology, I would say that adoption precedes adaptation. And we need to remember this. And I would say the biggest pitfall of all would be the plenitude of data that we have now. And it's people again who are required, it's leaders again who are required to make sense of that data and then take action on that. So example, you are looking at the sense of belongingness of any individual, and you use the surveys and you use the questions and you use the sentiment analysis and heat map and everything. Now you have data about everything, but how do you generate this data? What are the kind of questions that you are putting across? What are the answers that you are seeking? And aligning that to the kind of action that you want to take. Just throwing out a survey with a question, example of sense of belongingness. You ask like, do you wake up motivated to go to work? But that brings us the feeling answer, yes or no. But that's a feeling answer still. But if you make a small change and you ask, do you really, do you show up at work wanting to help others succeed? That's where the story changes, and then you see whether they really have that sense of belongingness at work with the organization they're working at or not. So I would say it would definitely need a leader to lead technology as well. And it's a perfect blend of technology and people as leaders. And this is the pitfall that leaders always need to have it at the back of their mind.
And not being able to balance both sides.
Yes, tech is not going to solve the problem. You are going to solve the problem with the help of the tech.
Well, thank you so much. I think this panel has given us really interesting insights on both ends, on what to do and what to be careful about. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We do have a few minutes for questions. If there are any, would love to take that. Is someone helping them with the mics? Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Manga here from RDI. Very interesting discussion, I must say. Everybody contributed beautifully. Thank you so much. The question is, when we talk about trust, it reminds me of an anecdote of someone who said that, of course you need to trust people, but you lock your door, you lock your car. So the thing is that while we are talking about, one is at the ideal level of doing something, and another one is the application of that at the ground level. I mean, sometimes we talk about very good stuff and we try to follow that up in our own way. But at times when we try to actually do it at the ground level, we really, of course, we need to be positive and trust people, but at the same time, we don't say that we really need to lock our car when we leave, or lock our door when we leave home. So where do you bridge that? I think anybody can give a shot at this.
Divya, do you want to take a shot at this one?
No, I'll in fact let Dr. Jayakumar talk about this.
No, he is asking where to. It will find, the water will find the level, okay? First time you may make a mistake. You do it, if you trusted somebody, or in the organization, somebody employee trusted and gave a feedback, and if you didn't keep up that trust and you didn't take a proper action, thing will go back. Whereas if you trusted and if you acted, then trust develops more. Then it goes. That's what I said. It's an upward circle. If you don't act, it will become a negative circle. So people are clever. People sense it. People will do one mistake. They will learn from the mistake. They will correct it. It in the positive side or in the negative side.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hope I answered your question.
Can I add one?
Sure,
thing?
please.
I would bring it back to the culture of listening, and I would bring it back to add the one word Karan said: how authentic is your listening? How agenda-less is your listening? And that's what again brings out the culture where you can trust. That's the only gateway to trust.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Captain Shubhendu Kumar. My question is basically linking customer and employees. Both ends we talk about satisfied employees make satisfied customers. Any mass best product brand or best consumer brand, they have listening centers 24/7 tracking in terms of what their consumers are talking about. In the last couple of years, some companies actually have taken some steps in terms of employing bots and trying to remove the human element of bias, what we talked about in terms of. But the last pandemic 2 years, when everyone was away, have we witnessed some kind of change where in a remote location, how did we capture the employee voice? Because they were totally disjointed. They were not connected with the organization. And that was a golden opportunity for all of us to think and probably look at, can we have a listening center for employees also? That's the question.
That's a great thought, actually. And since Divya, you spoke about the 360 of listening, both to employees as well as customers and so on. Do you want to take a stab at this one?
Sure. If I understand the question correctly, we are talking about, say, COVID times, and, if it prompted us to extend the employee listening that we do, similar to how we listen to the customers.
Transitioning from bots to the human element when everything is remote and not connected.
Right. So yes, I would give an example of how during those times where people were virtual and COVID, and I'll talk about the transition as well, some of the things that we did. So these were the times, COVID peaks had abated, but employees weren't still back in office, right? That connect was still missing. And employees, having not been connected with the organization or the people around, were anyways not as receptive to what we said and, the intent to share. In fact, to that extent, one of the tools that worked beautifully for us was this AI-based tool called Ramesh, where anyone could log in anonymously. The leaders were there coding questions. And there were some topics like, hey, we know that, the work stress have been high. Tell us what's leading to this work stress. And people could answer, and we could immediately see responses to say, hey, people are saying the work stress has been high because there have been too many meetings. Then us coding another question to say, hey, if there have been too many meetings, what has prompted you not to say no to attending a certain meeting? So that was what, was like, what should I say, a combination of a bot-based as well as a human approach, which worked really well in those times to help people open up. Today, I would say the times are different, right? Like I said, the continuous listening manifests differently, but there is a lot of face-to-face. There are a lot of, those points of collaboration where people come together, and there is an opportunity for an organization and leaders alike to catch the pulse. And that can manifest, differently, like we spoke about, a multitude of processes and systems that we have in place.
I think it's been a learning process for sure. And finally, we seem to be ending up like a workforce model, which I think someone referred to earlier, a hybrid model as well, even when it comes to people tools and listening tools, to your point, right? I'm sorry, we are kind of way beyond time, so we do need to pause now. But thank you so much to the panel for an exciting discussion, and thank you everyone here for being here and asking the questions.